Hello and welcome to A Guide to Transitions. We're going to start first by talking about why we use transitions in writing. So, in both academic writing and professional writing, your goal is to convey information clearly and concisely, if not to convert the reader to your way of thinking. Transitions help you to achieve these goals by establishing logical connections between sentences, paragraphs, and sections of your paper. So in other words, transitions tell readers what to do with the information you present to them. Whether single words, quick phrases, or full sentences, they function as signs for readers to tell them how to think about, organize, and react to old and new ideas as they read through what you've written. Transitions signal relationships between ideas, such as, another example coming up, stay alert, or here's an exception to my previous statement, or although this idea appears to be true, here's the real story. Basically, transitions provide the reader with directions for how to piece together your ideas into a logically coherent argument. Transitions are not just verbal decorations that embellish your paper by making it sound or read better. They are words with particular meanings that tell the reader to think and react in a particular way to your ideas. In providing the reader with these important cues, transitions help readers understand the logic of how your ideas fit together. There are two main types of transitions that we're going to talk about today. The first being internal transitions, which are transitions used within paragraphs, and then second, external transitions, or those transitions that are used between paragraphs. So internal transitions act as cues by helping readers to anticipate what is coming before they read it. They establish relationships between ideas and evidence within paragraphs. And typically, internal transitions are just single words or short phrases. Here is a list of transitional expressions. Sorry for the pause there, but here is a list of transitional expressions that we typically see within paragraphs. So you can access this link from both the PowerPoint, but it's also included in your stations document. So you'll notice that the transitions are divided according to the what each transition indicates to the reader. So for example, if you're going to signal an addition or something to go along with a point that you've already made, then you would use any of these transitions here. Yeah. So next we'll talk about external transitions, those between your paragraphs. So instead of treating paragraphs as separate ideas, external transitions can help readers understand how paragraphs work together, reference one another, and build to a larger point. The key to producing good transitions is highlighting connections between corresponding paragraphs. And by referencing in one paragraph the relevant material from previous paragraphs, writers can develop important points for their readers. So first, it's a good idea to continue one paragraph where another leaves off. In order to do this, you can pick up key phrases from the previous paragraph and highlight them in the next, and this can create an obvious progression for readers. Many times it only takes a few words to draw these connections. Also, instead of writing transitions that could connect any paragraph to any other paragraph, you want to write a transition that could only connect one specific paragraph to another specific paragraph. So let's walk through a couple example external transitions. So let's suppose that you want to argue that Americans are not as free as the conventional view would have us believe. So let's pretend that you have one paragraph in which you are going to share points to support the view that Americans live lives defined by freedom. And let's suppose your next paragraph is going to introduce points that contradict that previous view. So for example, Americans are not entirely free. So what would this transition paragraph, or this transition sentence look like between these two paragraphs? It could look something like this. So despite the predominant belief that Americans live their lives as they choose, there are in fact many institutionalized barriers to freedom in America. So here we have despite, which is a short transition to kind of begin the transition sentence. We've mentioned the previous point that was made in paragraph 1, and then we've transitioned into the next point that we'll address in paragraph 2. So we're essentially illustrating how these two ideas kind of build off of one another. So here's another example. Let's say you're writing a paper about Amy Tan, author of The Joy Luck Club, and your first paragraph is going to discuss how she became famous for her fiction, particularly this novel. And in your second paragraph, you want to talk about how Amy Tan has other lesser-known talents, including music. So here is a transition that doesn't quite do the job. There are other things to note about Tan as well, such as her musical career. So notice how we introduce the next topic in paragraph 2, but we don't do anything to connect it to the previous point. There's no sense of momentum, no real connection or building from one point to the next. Here's a better choice. Though her fiction is well known, Tan's musical career receives far less publicity. So here we've mentioned the previous point and have transitioned to the new one in such a way that we illustrate the relationship between our first point and our next, which is that they contrast. So, as these examples suggest, transitions can help reinforce the underlying logic of your paper's organization by providing the reader with essential information regarding the relationship between your ideas. In this way, transitions act as the glue that binds the components of your argument or discussion into a unified, coherent, and persuasive whole. So when it's time to begin drafting your paper and you are writing those external transitions between paragraphs, there's something that you should keep in mind. Transitions cannot substitute for good organization. If you are having difficulty making connections between paragraphs through external transitions, this may suggest that the paragraphs don't belong together at all, and thus you must rethink your overall organization. At this point, please pause this screencast and complete question number 1 under the transition station activity, and bonus points for anybody who can find the typo in this slide. Welcome back. I'd like to end with some signs that you might need to work on your transitions. So if you have heard or seen any of these following things, that's usually an indication that your transitions need a little bit of love. So first, your teacher has written comments like choppy, jumpy, flow, or how is this related on your papers. Your readers tell you that they had trouble following your organization or train of thought. You tend to write the way that you think, and therefore you may jump too quickly from one idea to the next. Lastly, you may have written your paper in several chunks and then simply pasted them together without thinking of how they connected. Okay, now that we are finished with the transition lesson, you may complete question number 2 on the transition activity.